For decades, fans around the world have sworn that the king of rock and the greatest star in Hollywood shared a secret encounter. Some say it was just a simple hello at the Paramount Studios. Others swear it was something more, something no one ever recorded, but that changed the myth of both forever. Today, we're going to open the archives, compare stories, and find out, did Elvis Presley really meet Marilyn Monroe, or is this just another golden legend of Hollywood? During the 1950s and 1960s, the world seemed to revolve around two figures who symbolized everything America wanted to be: Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe. He was the boy from Memphis who turned Southern rhythm into a worldwide fever. She was the woman who redefined the concept of beauty and feminine power on screen. Both were young, rich, idolized, and surrounded by rumors. And it's precisely at the crossroads of their two paths that one of pop culture's most talked about and debated stories was born. Did Elvis Presley really meet Marilyn Monroe? And you, what do you think? Did this meeting really happen, or is it just another charming invention of Hollywood? Comment below. I want to know your opinion. To understand this question, we need to go back in time. In the early 1960s, Elvis had just returned from military service. The Army had kept him away from the stage and the spotlight for nearly 2 years, but his comeback was triumphant. Hollywood was waiting for him with open arms, and the singer soon began filming GI Blues, a box office success that marked the beginning of a new phase in his career. Elvis was no longer just the rebellious rock boy. He was now a respected movie star with a busy schedule and a legion of fans who followed his every move.
Meanwhile, across Los Angeles, Marilyn Monroe was going through a period of transition. After conquering the world with films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The 7-Year Itch, she was trying to be taken seriously as an actress. She was filming Let's Make Love, co-starring with Yves Montand. The pressure was enormous. The press dissected every detail of her life, and the studios demanded a performance that went beyond the image of a sex symbol. Marilyn was the face of sensuality, but also an intelligent woman, striving for control over her own career. In that world of fame and glamour, Elvis and Marilyn seemed destined to cross paths. Both moved in the same Hollywood circles. They had mutual friends, managers, advisors, and agents who worked between film and music. Elvis's name was in every industry conversation. He represented the new generation, the sound that dominated the radio and filled the parties. Marilyn, on the other hand, was the classic star, already established as the great face of American cinema. When two phenomena of that magnitude coexist in the same time and place, it's natural for the public to imagine a meeting, a glance, maybe even something more. The first rumors of a meeting began to surface shortly after 1960. People connected to the Paramount Studios claimed that Elvis and Marilyn had crossed paths during a break in filming, possibly in a hallway. It would have been a quick moment. Something like, "Nice to meet you," maybe a smile, a handshake. There are reports that Joe Esposito, Elvis's friend and personal assistant, confirmed a brief greeting between the two, but nothing beyond that. For some researchers, this version is the most plausible. Their schedules aligned, both were working in the Los Angeles area at that time, and there was a natural curiosity among celebrities of the era to meet one another.
But there's a detail that makes this story even more intriguing: the total absence of any record. No photographs, no notes, no mentions in gossip columns. And that's strange, considering that both were followed by reporters everywhere. Marilyn couldn't leave her house without being photographed, and Elvis was watched like a global phenomenon. If a more intimate encounter had occurred, it's likely that some trace of it would have leaked to the press. That absolute silence is what still divides fans today. For some, it's proof that the meeting never happened. For others, it's exactly what makes it real. After all, Hollywood's greatest secrets have always been kept under lock and key. It's important to remember that at that time, Elvis still lived under the strict control of Colonel Tom Parker, his manager. Parker limited Elvis's contacts, managed his schedule, and controlled his public appearances. Nothing happened without his approval. He saw the singer as a brand, and any interaction that could cause controversy was carefully avoided. Marilyn, meanwhile, faced a hostile environment within the studios, fighting against directors and executives who tried to dictate every aspect of her image. She sought respect and privacy, which made it unlikely that she would openly get involved with another celebrity at the height of her fame. Even so, the idea that the two biggest icons of the 1950s and 60s might have looked at each other, even for a few seconds, still fascinates the public today. Perhaps because it represents the symbolic meeting of cinema and rock, of glamour and rebellion, of the woman who learned to command the camera's gaze and the man who made the world dance. Elvis and Marilyn personified the American dream, and dreams, as we know, tend to come alive in the stories people tell.
In the end, the first chapter of this narrative doesn't give us definitive answers. What we have are fragments, rumors, and the collective imagination that feeds on mystery. But understanding the context in which this story was born is essential. These were times when stardom was almost a golden prison, where every move was watched and a single gesture could become a headline. Perhaps the true fascination of this supposed story between Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe doesn't lie in knowing whether it happened, but in understanding how it reflects the way the public sees its idols, as extraordinary beings destined to meet, even if only for a few seconds in eternity. As the years went by, the story of a possible meeting between Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe stopped being just a rumor and began to take on the shape of a legend. What was once a simple backstage whisper turned into an engaging narrative, repeated and reinvented with each decade. The absence of concrete evidence left room for imagination, and it was in that void that the boldest accounts, the most romantic versions, and even the most unlikely theories emerged. The name that appears most often when this topic comes up is Byron Raphael, a former studio agent who claimed to have been responsible for introducing Elvis and Marilyn on a mysterious night in Beverly Hills. Byron worked at the William Morris Agency, one of the biggest talent agencies of the time. He claimed to have been an assistant to Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and said that one night, at Elvis's request, he arranged a meeting with Marilyn Monroe at the famous Beverly Wilshire Hotel. According to him, everything happened secretly. No cameras, no journalists, just the two icons in a private encounter. Raphael described the moment with almost cinematic detail, talking about an instant attraction, intense looks, and an unforgettable night. His story had all the elements the public loved: glamour, mystery, and romance. But there was a problem. No other member of Elvis's team confirmed this story. No friend, musician, or assistant ever said they heard the singer mention Marilyn. Elvis, who was known for openly talking with his friends about his personal experiences, never spoke about this supposed meeting. Joe Esposito, his right-hand man, was categorical in saying that Elvis and Marilyn crossed paths only once, briefly, in a studio. Raphael's version, on the other hand, seemed more like an attempt to place himself at the center of an attention-grabbing story than a factual account. What's most curious is that, even without proof, Byron Raphael's story found fertile ground. In the 1970s and 80s, as the cult of Elvis grew after his death, anything related to the singer became valuable. Books, interviews, and magazines began reproducing parts of the alleged story, often without checking its authenticity. The public wanted to believe. After all, imagining the king of rock and Hollywood's ultimate muse together was the kind of fantasy tailor-made for pop culture. Other versions began to appear, each more elaborate than the last. Some said the meeting lasted a few hours. Others swore they had met more than once. There were even claims that Marilyn had told friends she found Elvis too shy for a rock star. That phrase, never proven, spread among fans as if it were a secret confession. The lack of any documents or credible witnesses, however, kept everything in the realm of speculation. The strength of this legend can also be explained by the cultural context of the time.
Elvis and Marilyn represented opposite poles of the same American ideal. He was the symbol of rebellious youth, of rock that challenged norms and shocked the conservative. She was the embodiment of femininity and sensuality, a woman who both charmed and intimidated. Together, they would form the perfect couple for the collective imagination, the king and queen of an empire of fame and desire. The idea that these two worlds might have met, even for one night, satisfied the dream of millions of fans. But when researchers began to analyze the story carefully, the romantic plot began to crumble. Their filming schedules don't match the date Raphael gave. At the time he claimed the meeting happened, Elvis was engaged in studio commitments under Parker's strict supervision, and Marilyn was in intensive filming under the watchful eyes of Fox executives. Both led publicly monitored lives, and it was nearly impossible for a private meeting of that magnitude to go unnoticed. And you, what do you think of Byron Raphael's version? Did he really know something the world never discovered, or was he just feeding an irresistible myth? Leave your comment and tell us which theory you believe. Even so, there are still those who prefer to believe in the legendary version. Part of the charm of this story lies precisely in the mystery. The lack of evidence becomes the fuel for the myth. Every new generation of fans rediscovers the theory and retells it in its own way, blending facts, assumptions, and imagination. In forums, biographies, and social media, the question remains alive. What if it's true? What if, even without records, Elvis and Marilyn really shared a brief moment together? This insistence on keeping the legend alive says a lot about how the public builds and preserves its idols. For fans, Elvis and Marilyn are not just artists, but symbols greater than reality itself. They represent youth, glamour, and the idea of unattainable perfection. When two figures like these appear in the same narrative, historical truth ceases to be a priority. What matters is the feeling this story evokes. In the end, Byron Raphael's version is more a reflection of the nostalgia surrounding these two myths. Even without confirmation, it survives because it awakens the desire to imagine the impossible. The human mind loves to fill gaps, to build bridges between worlds that might never have touched. The supposed meeting between Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe is, above all, an expression of how much people need stories that transcend the ordinary. We may never know if it truly happened, but the very fact that this story continues to be told shows that for many, some legends are simply too great to disappear. Over the decades, the supposed meeting between Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe has become more than just a rumor. It's now part of American pop mythology. It's fascinating to see how, even without a single piece of concrete evidence, the story has crossed generations and reinvented itself countless times. Perhaps because, in a world driven by image and nostalgia, some stories don't need to be true to become immortal. The myth endures because it carries a symbolic power that goes beyond facts. It represents the union of two icons who defined an era, two faces that transformed the culture of a nation and forever marked the public's imagination. Every decade, new books, documentaries, and TV programs revisit the subject. Some treat it with skepticism, others with romance. And in a way, that shows how Elvis and Marilyn have ceased to be mere people and have become characters in America's own story. They are archetypes, the king and the goddess, who continue to fascinate even decades after their deaths. The simple act of imagining them together is enough to reignite public interest. What people seek is not confirmation of the meeting, but the feeling that two perfect worlds once collided, even for a brief moment. The myth of the encounter also reveals much about pop culture's power to create narratives that feel more real than reality itself. In the 1960s, when celebrities began to be treated as modern deities, the public wanted more than movies and music. They wanted personal stories, behind-the-scenes secrets. Fame stopped being just a consequence of talent and became a spectacle in itself. Elvis and Marilyn were the first to live that phenomenon intensely. Their lives were followed like soap operas. Any rumor became a headline. Any gesture was open to interpretation. And when those two universes were linked, even through gossip, the myth naturally took shape. Another factor that keeps the legend alive is the silence of those involved. Elvis never publicly denied the rumor, and Marilyn was never asked about it in interviews. This lack of answers created the perfect ground for imagination to flourish. It's common that, in the absence of evidence, the public chooses to believe the most interesting version, the one that stirs emotion and curiosity. After all, truth is rarely as fascinating as mystery. And in the case of Elvis and Marilyn, mystery is what keeps the flame alive. Fans, in turn, play a crucial role in keeping this story alive. The Elvis and Marilyn fan communities are among the most active in the world. They collect photos, newspaper clippings, old recordings, anything connected to their idols. At fan gatherings, debates about the topic are common, each person defending their own theory. Some firmly believe the meeting happened and was covered up by their managers. Others insist it was nothing more than a misunderstanding that grew over time. But the very fact that this discussion still exists proves that the myth still serves its purpose, bringing people together around a shared mystery.
There's also a psychological element to this story. Elvis and Marilyn represent opposite poles of the same cultural fantasy. He was the man who rose from poverty to the throne of rock, the symbol of masculinity and youthful rebellion. She was the woman who turned vulnerability into power, mixing sweetness and provocation in a unique combination. Together, they form the perfect imaginary couple, the dream of a time when glamour seemed eternal. The audience, upon hearing about this supposed meeting, projects their own emotions, desires, and even idealized notions of love and success. It's as if this story offers a glimpse into an ideal world where the greatest icons of beauty and music truly met. Over the years, artists, writers, and filmmakers have explored this fantasy in songs, paintings, and scripts. There are artworks, fan fictions, and even independent films that reimagine this meeting, always with the same tone of nostalgia and enchantment. Social media has given new life to the legend. Edits, AI-generated videos, and manipulated images spread rapidly, reinforcing the illusion that there's something real behind it all. And the more it's repeated, the more real it seems. It's the phenomenon of the digital myth. The more a story is shared, the stronger its emotional impact becomes, even without factual basis. The truth is, the supposed meeting between Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe survives because it represents more than a backstage rumor. It symbolizes the very essence of the American myth, the idea that fame is destiny, that stars exist above ordinary reality, that their paths inevitably cross at some point in time. Elvis and Marilyn never needed to truly meet to be connected. They belong to the same cultural pantheon, fueled by the same blend of talent, beauty, and tragedy.